I'm going to share with you the 7 habits of millionaires. And these are the exact same habits that I used as an introverted teenager to transform into an Emmy award-winning designer and to build a multi-million-dollar business. So let's dive into the 7 habits of millionaires, starting with habit number 1, which is to have a bias towards action. As far as I can tell, in the number of people I've coached in my life, the ones who are going to succeed the most have the greatest propensity towards taking action. Oftentimes what happens to us is we're waiting for complete sets of instructions before we take action. So we're stuck in this state of overthinking and never taking action. I know this. When somebody tells me to do something, I just start doing it. I don't question too much about whether it's going to work out or not, because my experience has taught me if it doesn't work at the beginning, you make adjustments along the way. The metaphor, the analog to all of this is you don't read a book on how to play basketball, you just start playing. And if you really want to take it seriously, you work with a coach or a mentor and they start to make small adjustments. And then before you know it, your skill level goes through the roof. And what I find with so many people is they are stuck at home plate. Actually, they're stuck in the dugout. They never even step on the plate and take a swing because they're so fearful that they're going to waste time and resources, that they actually waste time and resources not doing anything. The converse to having a bias towards action and the consequence of all this stuff is you wind up doing nothing. And we know that when you do stuff, you actually learn, you make progress, you learn what doesn't work. And every time you learn something that doesn't work, it moves you towards what might work and what could work and what will work eventually. And there's the great quote about this, which is something like, it is better to regret the things you did and not the things you did not do. So I don't want to live with regret, period. But I know that every time I do something, whether it works out or not, it's either I win or I learn something. And that's the attitude, the belief system you need to have if you want to be successful in this world. Habit number 2, treat your time like gold. It's precious, it's non-renewable, and it's perishable. And what do I mean by this? Okay, a lot of you are holding on to all the tasks that you have to do when you know in your heart someone else should be doing this, but you can't let go of the control, the need to be able to manage every single thing to the nth degree. And you justify it to yourself that I can do this better and faster than anybody. But when I frame it in a different way, you might have a very different answer. Let's just say you're a graphic designer. I know a lot of our audience are designers. And I say to you, are you literally the world's best designer? Like, well, no, I'm not saying that. Are you the best designer in your country? No, I'm not saying that either. In your state? No. In your city? No. So you're not the best. And then therefore you're limiting your growth by saying and acting as if no one else could do this at your level or even better. We know this within the world of startups in Silicon Valley, that A players hire A plus players. B players hire C players. They hire people worse than them. Your job and your mission should be to get everything off your plate that isn't necessary for you to do and only to focus on the things only you can do, and to be very strict with that definition, because a lot of times we're like, well, I'm the only person who can do this. This is really important. And you are able to grow your business to a point in which you no longer have to hire B players because of financial constraints, that you can actually afford to hire people better than you. I've been very fortunate in my life and my career that at the very early stages, I was able to hire people, and surprise, surprise, they knew more, they were more capable of doing things, and I grew as a consequence or as a result of that. Eventually, I get into a position where I hire designers who care more about the design than I do, so I rest really easy at night knowing that all of our clients are in really good hands because I put someone in charge who cares about it to a degree above my own level of quality control. And that's the benefit. So people often wonder, like, well, Chris, easy for you to say because you're now successful and you have the resources, but I have to tell you, I am successful and I have the resources because I made this decision at the beginning and not after the fact. So people who don't have a healthy mindset around this say, one day I'll be able to afford to hire someone. Or as the successful entrepreneur, the $1 million mindset that you have is, I will make sacrifices so that I can hire the people so that I can have the money to hire more people. They don't look at people as an expense. They look at them as an ROI, return on investment. They don't look at hiring people as the dilution of the energy, but as a multiplicative effect of being able to do more in less time at a higher quality. That's the millionaire mindset you need to adopt. Habit number 3, talk to strangers. Sounds really weird because we've been told, be careful strangers, they could do bad things to us, and we start to internalize that. You add a healthy dose of introversion, the social awkwardness, and lack of social skills, and it can create a pretty nasty recipe. How do I know about this? Because this was me. This is my story. And I am the type of person who, when clients came by, I would just hide in my room. And my executive producer would say, hey, we're going to have a client dinner that I was paying for. And I'm like, I don't want to go. You go. And then one day my business coach tells me, Keir McLaren says, you know what happens when the clients no longer want to work with you? Who is the relationship with? Is it with you, the creatives, or the producer? Well, I know the answer to that. It's definitely not with me because they didn't even know that I exist. They've been working with the creative team who went out to dinner with them, and the executive producer who's in their ear all the time. And so we've learned that whoever is closest to the client makes the most amount of money. So your inability to go and to talk to people, to connect with them in a genuine way, I don't even want to use the word networking, but to be able to build real relationships with people means you'll almost always be at the end of that chain, because everybody takes a little bit of the money away from the budget as it moves down the chain. This is why the people who actually do the work have the least amount of money and the lowest amount of profit. Okay, so you're sitting there thinking to yourself, well, what am I supposed to do about this? Here's the simple thing. Literally make the habit of speaking to strangers. Go talk to somebody you've never met with no other agenda except for to help them or to just start up small talk. This is the power of small talk. So there's cafes that I go to, and I'm a creature of habit. And this one place in particular, fast casual restaurant, would always have a queue in front of the door, mostly because the register was right by the door. So it created a kind of little bottleneck. But their menu wasn't the easiest to figure out. And so I would always sit there and I would eavesdrop on what somebody else was talking about. And I noticed like they were struggling with figuring out what the menu was. And I said, are you guys new in town? Is this your first time here? They're like, oh yeah, we are. I'm like, okay, well, let me just tell you something. Everything you order is going to be great. I come here all the time. And here's all you need to do. You can either order one of the preset salads or meals, or you just pick a protein, pick a veg, and pick a side, and you're going to be great. Like, oh, is that it? And I would do this for every single guest. I became an unofficial, unpaid ambassador for this cafe or this restaurant, and it didn't go unnoticed because the manager would always like, Chris, I put something extra in your order. I'm like, you did? Every time I did this, I felt like I was being of service to people, helping them to make a decision, also expediting the line on behalf of this place that I really care about. I would just transfer those skills and do it with other people. So what I want to tell you all is go make some small talk. Be the unofficial ambassador to some place you feel comfortable with. Where does this skill apply? Well, when I was being the unofficial ambassador to this fast casual restaurant that I go to almost every single day, it did not go unnoticed. So the manager, John, and I became friends. We would talk and he would always greet me. He's like, Chris, the usual, all those kinds of things. So here's the interesting thing. I had learned that they were looking into rebranding because I said, I love this place so much. I'm curious if you guys are looking to do new design work. And he goes, you know what? I heard from the general manager that this was happening. So through that point, he then introduced me to the chief marketing officer and we had a whole dialogue. We went through what they were doing. It didn't go beyond that, but it's really interesting that you can start off doing something super innocent to be of service to people, and it builds natural connection that can open doors you didn't even know existed. Habit number 4, be a forever student. There's an expression that goes something like this. The more I learn, the more I know what I don't know. It's the problem of the ignorant people who assume they already know everything. And there's a certain amount of judgment or stigma to say to people, I'm a student. But here's the thing, I love to learn. My own happiness, my own self-worth comes from the progress that I make every day, every month, every year, the person that I become versus the person that I was. And I love to learn and I want to be a forever student. What does that mean? I don't consume information to say that I've done something. It's not a thing I do on a checklist. It's not something I do at a dinner party to tell people how educated I am with pinky raised in the air. What I know comes from the materials that I've absorbed with the intentionality that I'm going to teach or talk about this at some point in the near future. So I create scenarios for myself. The books behind me and the books that I read, the videos that I watch, I try to teach someone because I need to use that information. I need to get it out of my system. And the more times I share that with someone, the more likely it is going to stick with me. Here's the really cool part. I'm not trying to do this, but what happens as a consequence, as a byproduct of this, is that people start looking at you a little bit differently. They say, wow, you have deep thoughts. You have a wealth of knowledge and experience. And they just assume you've lived all these adventures. But you know what? I've read most of them. I've lived some of them, but the lines start to blur because in a way, in my command of the information I learn, it becomes part of my experience and my identity. And so I think it's kind of important that we go outside of our field of expertise, like once we achieve some level of mastery, quote unquote mastery, and to expand that so that we can then tie different ideas together and be more strategic and kind of look at the broader picture. And I'm able to do this in a lot of aspects. And that way, when I enter into a conversation with a business person that might have a whole different area of expertise in an industry I know nothing about, it's much easier for me to find the common ground and tie things together for them. This is how you become a strategic thinker and to be a more valued person other than to do the things that you know how to do. So be a forever student. Habit number 5, questions are greater than answers. In our society, we've been trained and socialized to give answers. First student raises their hand with the answer is rewarded. The student who can answer all the questions quickest, fastest, most accurately wins. And so we grow up in a system where the rules have been clearly defined. The answers are more important than questions. In fact, when a teacher gives you instructions and you raise your hand, it's like, Miss Smith, I have a question about this. And eventually Miss Smith will get so agitated. It's like, no more questions, Chris. Let's get into the quiz or whatever it is we're going to do. They shouldn't do that, but sometimes that happens. And maybe it's happened to you, or maybe you're the one who's done that. Now, when we enter into a business context and we hold on to these ideas that the answers are what they're looking for, we get into a really bad habit, which is to give answers before we fully understand what the problem is. I think it was Maya Angelou who said, there's no such thing as the right answer to the wrong question. So if I'm asking you the wrong question and you give me the answer, I can walk away with a false sense like I have a solution to my problem, only to later realize this wasn't the problem at all. This happens a lot, right? So the analog to this in a non-business context is you have a problem with your car, you go into the mechanic and you say, oh, I have a problem with the transmission, XYZ is wrong. And they go and fix that. They've given you an answer. You've given them the problem. And then 2 weeks later, 2 days later, that problem exists again. And you bring it back in. And you're like, hey, you didn't fix the problem. He goes, I know. But you told me this is what you wanted to do, so I did exactly what you wanted to do. He goes, well, if you had known that, why didn't you fix the real problem? This is why we need to slow down, be curious a little bit longer, be slower to give answers, and to make sure we're solving the right problem. This is the big reset here for everybody. We've been told, and we champion this idea, be a problem solver, be a problem solver. Your value is in solving problems. We need to shift away from being a problem solver to a problem seeker. If you want to move away from being an order taker, like would you like fries with that, you have to learn how to ask better questions. The reason why people pay me so much money for my time is because I help them get clarity on what their problem is by asking better questions. And if you're paying careful attention, my ability to do this is tied to our previous point, which is I'm a forever student. I don't want to assume I have the answers. And that leads me to habit number 6, which is feedback is a gift. So most of us, when we make something, we're reluctant to ask for feedback from anybody because our greatest fear is they're going to say this is not good, or they're going to give us critique or reasons why it's not going to work or something else. And we're so in love with our own ideas that at this point, we're so deep in the process, we can't bear to change anything. So we don't seek feedback. We don't seek criticism. So what happens is we go and launch a product, a service, or we post an article or a carousel or something on social media, only then for people later to say, well, I wouldn't have phrased it that way. And we're like, well, where were you? Well, they weren't there because you weren't seeking the feedback, and you don't perceive feedback as a gift. Real feedback isn't saying this is dumb or that's great. Those are just opinions. Those are very subjective. Real feedback is thoughtful, intentional communication to you as to what's not working and what can be improved. It takes a real skilled person to be able to do this. So as I say, feedback is a gift. Not everybody is giving gifts that you want. So be careful of who you seek feedback from, but be open-minded and open spirit and realize the gift that you're getting so that you can better yourself and improve the things that you're doing. And if you want a deep dive on this very idea, there's this video that you want to check out. It's called Why Critical Feedback Will Help You Grow. And now on to habit number 7, last but not least, why innovation is messy and wasteful. So there's this idea within corporate culture, within companies, that We want to be innovative. Everybody says, of course we want to be innovative. We want to come up with new ideas. We want to think outside the box. Conversely, they say we need to be really efficient. Those are two opposing ideas. They don't live in the same universe. You cannot be simultaneously innovative and efficient. So most companies prematurely decide they're in an efficiency building mode. They try to cut costs, they try to systematize everything and create processes and ways of working so that they can do more in less time. They've settled into an efficiency mindset. And then what happens is they get T-boned on the freeway of innovation and their business is no longer viable in the marketplace. They've let time go by. They're not jumping on certain trends and shifting attitudes and behaviors of people. So what you want to do is you want to have a mindset and a culture of, you know what, we have to try lots of things before we know what's going to work. And we don't want to be stuck in the mindset of trying things. We actually need to try them. In the book Rework, there's this chapter on making small bets versus one big gamble, the way that you can mitigate the potential disruption that's going to happen to your own business and service, right? You want to take one large project, one big initiative, and chop it up into 10 smaller projects or initiatives. And the way that would work is you would take a $100,000 budget, and instead of launching one gigantic video or one gigantic refresh of an app or website, you would say, what is one idea we can try that we can execute this month that we can spend $10,000 on and see if the result? The cool part is you'll probably make lots of mistakes on your way. By the time you hit mistake 7 or 8, you've learned a ton, so it informs each new initiative that you take. This is how you create a culture of innovation because you've realized that innovation is messy and inherently very wasteful. And this is exactly how I was able to reinvent our creative agency every 3 to 5 years to stay relevant and top of mind and be able to make over $80 million. And if you want more on that, watch this video here titled How I Scaled My Agency to $80 million in Business.